Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to TED Talks Ball. Super excited. We've got a special Wednesday afternoon edition, a special Combine edition, NFL Combine 2024 edition. I've got a special guest today, Benjamin Camperman, in the house. You may also know him on Twitter and X as @Camper1Report. Great guy. We've streamed a few times together. And glad we were able to figure out a time to do it again. So, Ben, thanks for being here today.
I'm really glad to be on the show. When you reached out to me, said we need to do a collab again soon, I was like, let's do it, because it's been a while. It's been, I don't know, probably almost a year now. I'm not sure when the last time we collab was, but it's good to be on the show. Excited to talk Niners. To me, other than the NFL season, the draft and free agency season is my favorite time. It's a time where I really like looking at all the draft prospects. I love doing the mock drafts. So it's just, this season is just a really fun time to discuss. So I'm happy to be on the show.
Cool. It sounds like you're much better prepared for the draft than I am. I got to do some catching up, but like we got some time between the combine and the draft to kind of look through combine results, look through college football tape and all that good stuff to sort of help me develop my draft crushes, because I really don't have a ton of them just yet.
I've really only focused on the first round. I get, like you said, I mean, we're still 2 months away. So with the month of March is going to be like, or even the month of April as well, is going to be a really, after free agency is when you can really start to focus on what pieces we need, because free agency is going to come and go. And we really don't know, because the 49ers, like, we have in mind, both of us, we have an agenda of what the 49ers should do. But what if the 49ers all of a sudden decide to get really aggressive in this free agency? And then, they've signed a good receiver, and we're like, oh, they don't need to draft a receiver. I'm just trying to put out a example, but that's, free agency tells us a lot of what is going to happen with the draft. So I'm really like this. These are all like we're trying to take an educated guess of what the 49ers are going to do, but we really don't know. So
no, we never do. I mean, heck, last year I thought we would draft a corner and an offensive tackle. And I guess we drafted Darrell Luter, but I meant early, a top corner and a top tackle prospect. And I thought we'd draft a tight end who could block and catch. I even had Joe Valerio on back last year before the draft, who's a former chief offensive tackle who holds the record for most NFL touchdowns by offensive linemen. He caught, as a chief, it's funny, he caught 3 from Montana and 1 from Steve Bono. A lot of the ex-Niner quarterbacks back then used to go become chiefs. And anyway, I was wrong about both of those. I guess we did draft 2 tight ends, but again, not early and not ones that could do both. Latu, excellent blocker, excellent route runner, terrible hands. And Braden Willis, excellent route runner, excellent hands, not so much of a blocker. Kind of like our incumbent tight ends, Ross Dwelley and Charlie Warner. Dwelley can catch, Warner can block. They're all kind of half tight ends, in my opinion. So I was really encouraged to see that John Lynch talked about that, how the offense really can't be the offense that Kyle envisions without 2 tight ends who can both block and catch,
right,
a la George Kittle. Now, we're obviously not going to get a Kittle, but just someone who can block and catch. They don't have to be at Kittle's level, but just so that you're not telegraphing the play by the personnel you bring into the huddle. So,
absolutely. I don't know. I mean, as far as, what do you think? Do you think we get one in free agency? I don't know if there's really any guys out there that are super good, but the draft could be interesting as well. I know we have 11 picks. I'm really fully expecting the 49ers to trade up in the first round, or one of the rounds, and use some of those picks. I don't think we're going to actually end up drafting all of them. I think we're going to do a similar situation to what we did last year with Jair Brown, when we traded up and gave a few of our picks. I can't remember who we traded up with, but we traded up to draft Jair Brown. So I expect it to be similar to that, but I'd like to know what you think. Like, do we draft a tight end? Do we take that position seriously? Do we draft one high in the, draft? I mean, I know we drafted Latu last year. He hasn't panned out so far. And then what's our other guy we drafted in the 7th round?
Braden
Braden
Willis.
Willis. Yeah.
Mhm.
He also played and didn't really make an impact. So I'm curious to see what happens. Do we take another shot at a tight end if we really like a prospect? I don't know. I haven't gotten into that position yet, but we'll see. And the draft is going to tell us a lot for sure.
No doubt about it. Yeah, there are some notable free agents. There's one I really like at the top of the list for Spot Track or Spotrac, however you pronounce that. Hunter Henry, who has been in New England for a little while. He did some really good stuff there, despite weak quarterback play from Bailey Zappi and Mac Jones. Another former Patriot tight end who was also, I believe, a Tennessee Titan first, was Jonnu Smith. He and Hunter Henry both went to the New England together, but then Jonnu Smith ended up going to Atlanta after he didn't do so well for New England, and now Atlanta has released him, so he's definitely available. Dalton Schultz is a pretty good option for the Texans, but I have a feeling that the Hunter Henrys and Dalton Schultzes of the world are going to be too expensive for the 49ers budget for tight end.
One that could be interesting is Gerald Everett. He's more like you were telling me backstage about Jawan Jennings. He'd be more of a guy. He's almost like less of a blocking tight end, more of like a slot receiver hybrid. He's listed as a tight end, but he's more of a receiving tight end than a blocking tight end. That would be interesting. Like if we don't go slot receiver in the draft, Gerald Everett would definitely be something. And I don't think he'd be too expensive. I mean, he's had injury issues in his career. And he's had some productive years. So he had like 560 yards with the Rams one year, and he's a great third down threat. So that would be interesting. Yeah.
No doubt about it. Yeah. Gerald Everett is a solid tight end for sure. Spotrac has him at $6 million AAV in 2023, but I bet we could get him for less than that. Mike Gesicki is another name that's available, former Dolphins, and then also he went to New England, and now he's a free agent. He made 4.5 last year. One I like is Noah Fant. Plus, you'd be taking him from the Seahawks. That always makes me smile anytime we can steal a player from the Seahawks. He basically went to the Seahawks as part of the Russell Wilson trade deal. And, he's not a really outstanding tight end in any way, but he can block and he can catch. And so I think that even something like that, it doesn't have to be Kittle, even a half Kittle, I think would be enough to really maximize our offense and really let Kyle unleash his full wizardry, you might say. A couple others on there, Austin Hooper. He's most recently with the Raiders, but he's been everywhere. He was with the Falcons back when it was Matt Ryan in the Super Bowl with Kyle. He then went to the Browns for a while. I think there might have been one or two other stops. I don't know how much treads left on the tire, gas left in the tank, if you will, with Austin Hooper, but he's definitely had some good years. Whether he has any left, he's 29. It says 29.2, so coming up on 29.5. And then I guess one other one I would always mention, Robert Tonyan. He played really well for Green Bay. He caught a lot of touchdowns from Aaron Rodgers. But then he tore his ACL, and I don't feel like he's ever really been the same ever since then. So that might be a little bit tricky. But again, if the price is right, his AAV in 2023 was just a mere 2.6 million. Then you start getting into the pretty, like for instance, it'd be it'd be a 900K more than Ross Dwelley. It was 1.7. Right. So I don't know if that makes sense with what he's done lately, but what he did with Aaron Rodgers, I think some of that could be poor QB play. He's most recently coming from the Bears. They also have Cole Kmet too, who's a pretty solid tight end. So, I don't want to make excuses for him or anything like that, but
the big thing is like, what are the 49ers looking for? Is it long term, or because I feel like Austin Hooper, Robert Tunyon, all these guys, you're really just looking for a 1 or 2 year rental. They haven't had the greatest injury history. I know you were just mentioning Robert Tunyon with his torn ACL. Austin Hooper, I believe, hasn't. I know this because of fantasy. He's missed some games as well. And so it's just George Kittle had one of his first almost fully healthy seasons last year, but there is no guarantee that he's going to have that again. And then if you pick up one of these guys who's also had injury concerns, how guaranteed is it that both of those guys, or at least one of those guys, is going to make it the full length of the season next year? And so I think drafting, or I don't know, evaluating what you have in Cameron Latu, but maybe even drafting another guy in the 3rd or 4th round maybe could be interesting as well, because those are the type of guys that are younger and maybe don't have as many injury issues and have some fresh legs to last the distance of the season. So it's really just what you're looking for. I would rather go into the draft and draft a tight end, because there are some great names out there, but it's really just what you want. And I don't know if the 49ers, I think George Kittle still has something left in him. So it's like, you don't want another veteran. You almost want a young guy to complement him. And that's what they tried to do last year. Maybe they go a little bit higher in the draft. Maybe they really like a tight end in the 2nd round and they go there. So that could be interesting.
No doubt about it. Hey, we got some folks in the chat. Let's just say hi to everybody real quick. We got Daniel Berry Sports Highlights in the house saying what's up and yo. He has his own channel, so make sure you check him out, everybody. He is a Rams fan, but he's cool. He's cool. We got the Long John podcast, another.
That's my brother.
Here. Oh, there you go. Well, welcome, Benjamin's brother. And what's up from the road? Well, welcome, and thanks for being here. We also got CarCast in the house. He has his own channel. He just hit 500 subs recently, so congrats on that, CarCast. And welcome. Good to see you. I should mention we are streaming to both channels. So if you're on TED Talks Ball, make sure you get over to Ben's channel and give him a like and subscribe. Same thing if you're on Ben's channel, if you could do that for me. Also, if you guys are watching on a browser, open up 2 tabs. Watch us both at the same time. It gives us more view hours. It really helps us out. So thanks in advance for all of that. See here, the Long John says, your brother says, I would definitely take a tight end, similar to how the Eagles did it when Brent Selleck was retiring. If that was Dallas Goedert, then yeah, absolutely. Sign me
I
up,
believe
please.
he's talking about Zach Ertz, because if the timeline is correct, Brent Selleck, I believe he was talking about Zach Ertz, and then Dallas Goedert. Yeah,
Zach Ertz had a great career, no doubt about it. I mean, not as much of a blocker as I would like, but if you can catch that well, I could probably overlook it.
Well, that's another guy where, I mean, I know that he's old and banged up, but Zach Ertz would be an interesting tight end if you wanted to bring him in. He's another veteran option for a veteran minimum. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Zach Ertz, Jimmy Graham, Michael Pruitt. I liked him before, and he just didn't stick when he was here with us briefly a year or 2 ago. That's probably it for the names that I would really go after out there. And maybe Adam Troutman. I don't know. I feel like he's more just notable for his height than for his tight end ability.
Right.
Got Shardal Gupta in the house saying hi, Benjamin. Hi, Ted. Great job. Thanks, Shardal. Great to see you. Brian Culp apologizing for being late. That's okay. We were a few minutes late ourselves, Brian. I always say better late than rushed. So as long as you weren't rushing to get here, no worries. We want you fresh and ready to go. Got a new channel here. This must be a friend of yours, Benjamin. Calvin's Hobbs. They already took 2 tight ends last draft. We need O-line help. Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm not saying take tight end instead of O-line. No. I mean,
now if Brock Bowers slips to, the top, outside the top 15, which he's not probably going to, then I'd love to take Brock Bowers, a generational talent at tight end. Sorry, I interrupted.
No. Anytime. I'm not real strict on, as long as we're listening to each other. Sometimes it's good to jump in because sometimes I
Yeah.
find when I'm too patient and I wait and I forget. I'm like, I get my chance. I'm like, oh God, I forgot what I was going to say. It's probably
Yeah, right.
more from being old like me, but it just happens in these things. So I'd much rather have you interject than wait and forget. So no worries there. Yeah, I mean, as far as so, tell us about where's Brock coming out of?
He's from Georgia. He's gonna probably be like a top 15 pick. He's more, I mean, great blocker, but also really is a great. He's just like a great all around player. He's also has the pedigree that you want. I think he started for like 3 years in Georgia at Georgia, 2, 3 years at Georgia. Has put up some crazy numbers. I don't have him up now, but
It's a pretty
um,
good program, you might say.
yeah, and they use tight ends a lot. They generated it was funny because last year they had a tight end going out of the draft. I don't know which team he went to, but then the real star of last year, everyone last year in the draft was saying, yeah, Georgia's um this tight end is going to the draft from Georgia, but the real prospect is Brock Bowers, which is next year, which is 2024. So Brock Bowers, I mean, for 2 years has been on everyone's radar. He's a great tight end. I don't think the 49ers will be able to get him, nor should they. I mean, a trade up for a tight end is a bold move, especially for this team, but definitely check him out. Yeah.
There you go. Uh, Bryant Culp says we should be talking Devin Culp, tight end from Washington. I don't know much about Devin Culp, so fill us in, Bryant, or if you know Benjamin, feel free to jump in. I would just say with the Brock tight end you were mentioning, like could get a little confusing though with Brock Purdy
Yeah.
and Brock. I'm sorry, what's his last name again? The
Brock
tight end for
Bowers.
Bowers. Like you got BP and BB, I guess. But yeah, I don't know much about. I mean, I know that Washington was obviously in the Natty, so
Yeah.
congrats to them, and came close to winning it. You could say. I mean, that was a great game, but Harbs
They've
finally
actually
got.
got two ends going Washington. Devin Culp and Jack Westover. So I'll definitely check them out. Yeah.
Oh, I think Bryant Culp is probably partial to Devin Culp, just
Yeah.
because of the name. But maybe he's better too. I mean, for all I know, I don't know a ton about the Huskies. I was rooting for them in the Natty for a minute, and then I was like, I saw all the Seahawks fans rooting for them, and I was like, oh, I don't mind if they lose, if it's gonna
You'd root
upset the
against Jim
Seahawks fans.
Harbaugh?
Yeah, see, that's the thing. I do like Harbaugh. I don't like him better than Kyle, but I mean, when you have that long streak from basically Mooch to Harbs, it was some dark
Yeah.
years in there. 7, 8, 9 years of darkness. So Harbaugh, always appreciate Harbaugh for kind of putting us back on the map, even though we didn't win a ring. Kyle's over 2 in the Super Bowl too, so that can't be
Yeah.
criteria for being happy with a coach recently. For if you want to be, and I do, I want to be happy with our coaches. And speaking of Kyle, he announced that he won't be at the combine. I was like, oh well, good, maybe he won't screw up those early picks like he usually does. But then I found out
Usually he
he
never
hasn't been
is.
there for 3 years. This is his 3rd year in a
Yeah.
row of not being there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a non-story. It's
It's
kind of
usually John Lynch and those guys who kind of deal with that type of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get it. And Adam Peters, and I'm obviously bummed that Adam Peters is a commander now. And I'm hoping that, his role within the scouting and, GM tree of the 49ers was maybe a little bit over glorified,
Right.
because we never really know who is in charge of what decision until later. And even then, it's funny how, like, at first with Brock Purdy, they're like, oh yeah, it was Greasy was the one who identified Brock Purdy. And then towards the end, like right for the Super Bowl, seemed like kind of everybody was kind of taking credit for it. Like, oh yeah, no, it's me. I was involved. And so I think some of those things change with time too, depending on how a player does or whatnot. But it's a definite concern. When I found out we lost Adam Peters, I was like, we better win the Super Bowl this year, and not have to wait until 2024, because it's going to be a lot tougher, I think,
Right.
without Adam Peters helping us out this draft, and free agency and all that stuff.
So one tight end that we're going quickly, I just want to name a name at tight end that has been interesting to me so far. Cade Stover from Ohio State. He's a guy who we could probably get in the third round, something like that. And he runs a 4.55, which is pretty good for a tight end. 6'4", 251. So he's a little bit on the lighter side, but he is pretty tall. And he's a great yak player if you watch him, a great run after catch tight end, which is what the 49ers love. Doesn't drop a lot of balls. A great just frame. I mean, if he could build a little bit more weight, then, well, I guess if he's at 250, then for a tight end, that's probably pretty good. But physical player. So that would be an interesting guy that we could get in the third round if we're looking for another tight end. Cade Stover.
Sentinel has his own football channel. Make sure you check him out. He was saying victory has 1,000 fathers, but defeat is an orphan. In other words, like, oh yeah, the better Brock did, the more fathers he had within the Niners scouting organization. I think there's a lot of validity to that. Also want to say hi to Great One, stopped in. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. We're better now that you're here, obviously. I think Bryant was joking when he said, LOL, Devin is my cousin, because he said LOL. But definitely that would be the side of the family that got the height, Bryant. Because Bryant Kolf is not as tall as most tight ends, I would say. But hey, what are you gonna do? He's a great guy, great show. Make sure you check him out. His wife Tony, amazing stuff with the women of the Niners Roundtable every Saturday. Awesome stuff from the Culp family, locking it down and Niners content creation. We saw that. Sent out to Bryant. We got Rob D in the house saying, what's good, faithful? Welcome, Rob D. Better now that you're here. So yeah,
welcome.
So we got so Stover. Oh, okay. All right. I'm like, that's a football name. I remember a Stover, but it was Matt Stover, who was a kicker. I wonder if there's any relation.
Well, and I mean, this guy, Cade Stover, I could look that up, but Cade Stover, he had 14 yards per reception average in his career. Dang. So he's a physical dude. He has a 6'4", he has a wide frame. I mean, that's a guy that if you're looking at the combine, I'm definitely going to be watching some of it. That's a tight end that I definitely watch out for that. And a
6'4", 250, that's what Kittle was coming out, right?
Yeah, I mean, a 4.55 is in the 93rd percentile of tight ends that have gone.
Kittle was a 4.53, so
yeah. So that's a definitely look for Cade Stover. That's an interesting one. I watched a lot of Ohio State because they're in Michigan's conference, which I cover I watch Michigan, so I definitely got to watch him a little bit during college, and I saw him. I was like, oh yeah, he's going to the draft. So yeah.
No, that's big. That's big. I like it. So as far as do you have any offensive tackle crushes that you like?
So JC Latham, that's a guy that if you watch the show, that's a guy who I'm super big on. He's a guy who's not super, fluid. He's a huge, I believe I could get up his stats right here. 360, 6'6", 360. So he's a big tackle. And again, the Alabama doesn't run the outside zone scheme, but I feel like if you can maybe get him to drop 15, 20 pounds, he's a guy who is very athletically gifted and has a very quick first step out of the break. He's a right tackle, obviously out of Alabama. First quick step out of the break. And very rarely, like he's a big dude, but for being 6'6", 360, very rarely does he get beat on the outside with speed. Like he's just a very fluid athlete for now. Again, he doesn't play a lot of, like I said, outside zone. And so if you could maybe, but I feel like he's a player that you could get him to drop weight and kind of mold him into the tackle that you want him to be. And if he's not ready year one to play right tackle, then you could just move him inside to the right guard position, which we need a right guard, and he could probably play that as well because he has insane amount of power. He runs a 4.85, and for a 360 offensive lineman, that's insane. I mean, no one he has the strength. No one bull rushes him. The only thing is, like I said, sometimes, he can get a little bit off balance because he's just so big. If he's not the most flexible dude, but man, if we could get him to cut weight, he's a guy that right now is projected around 20th, pick 20 in the draft. But he's a guy that, like, if we can trade up for him, I'm fully expecting us to use some of our picks to trade up. I like that dude a lot. So that's a guy who definitely keep an eye out for him from Alabama. Another guy, Amarius Mims. You guys have probably all heard him before, from Georgia, right tackle from Georgia. He only played like 700 snaps in college. I feel like he only played like a season and a half of football in his whole entire college career due to injuries and also just not starting all those years. But he's 6'7", 340, and hasn't played a lot of outside zone run, but his footwork is just elite. I mean, just with JC Latham, first step out of the break, really good. His hands, he mirrors. I mean, very good at, forcing the defensive lineman into the inside and then really latching on, because the problem is like with offensive linemen, if they allowed the defensive end to get to the outside, it's a lot harder to latch onto them and hold them in their place. But he's very good at pushing the defensive lineman, using his hands to push the defensive lineman more to his inside foot so he can just really latch onto them. So he's another guy, Amarius Mims out of Georgia. He's a guy who I feel like the 49ers could almost just get at pick 31 because he hasn't played a lot of snaps. He doesn't have a ton of experience, but if the 49ers still have a little bit of faith in Colton McKivitz, which I think he's a decent right tackle to start for a few games, let Amarius Mims sit if they don't think he's ready yet. So that's a guy that you could just stay at 31 and maybe get. So
cool. Good to know. So some big folks, some space eaters, and potentially could be worked into those zone run scheme if they could lose a little weight, like you're saying.
Yeah.
I like that. That's good. And big programs, right? Alabama, Georgia, SEC. This is the creme de la creme of NCAA football. So a lot to like with both of those names for sure. Rob D says days seem so much longer in the off season. I need more Niner football in his best Christopher Walken voice. I like it. Yeah, they are longer. Sundays are weird without football. There's no doubt about it.
The first Sunday after we lost the Super Bowl, I was just like, what is going on here? I do definitely get your pain. Yeah.
No doubt about it. Also, it's kind of nice though not being stressed out on Sundays too. A lot more relaxing.
Yeah.
For sure. But when you get the W, which we got a lot of this season, that eases a lot of the stress. Well, sometimes there was some stress of how we got them, but yeah, no doubt about it. What are some other areas of need you'd like to see addressed in the draft and or free agency, but just areas of need on the Niner saying defense? We have talked a little bit of offense here with tight end and O-line, but if there are other offensive positions that you think we should address high up in the draft?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm going to start with, do you mind if I think the 49ers, they should go in free agency and get a defensive end. And I know, we probably shouldn't invest anymore into the defensive end position, but Leonard Floyd is out there. He's a free agent, and Leonard Floyd, he hasn't missed a game in 3 years, or maybe missed one in 3 years. So he's a very very healthy player. He's played a lot of games, and he doesn't miss a lot of games. He's had 10 sacks the last 3 seasons or something like that. I'm looking at his contract right now because I'm wondering like how much he'd actually cost. But that was a guy who his last deal was about 16 million per year. And so if you could maybe, I mean, get him on a 12, $13 million contract, and if he wants to come and play for a contender, Leonard Floyd would 100%. If you're talking about being a little bit more aggressive in free agency, Leonard Floyd would 100% be a guy out there that I would go and get. And then in the draft, I mean, I think the Niners, although we don't want to really see them draft a receiver, I think the Niners could definitely go and get one. One that I'm kind of thinking of is Keon Coleman out of Florida State. His big board rank is 39th, but we'll see where he slips to. But if he does end up slipping, we have a second round pick at the end of the second round. He's a guy who's 6'4", 215 pounds, so he's a little bit taller. He could be a perfect Juwan Jennings replacement. He's the height that Juwan Jennings is. So definitely I would like to see us address the receiver position. And I think like maybe not high up, but I think that Kyle Shanahan is going to do something with the receiver position, whether we like it or not. Again, is enamored by receivers. He was a receiver. I think this is another draft where we draft one, third, second round, and Keon Coleman's definitely a guy that I would look at.
I like that. Keon Coleman. And you mentioned Juwan Jennings. Yeah, they're similar in height because you said Keon is 6'4", Juwan's 6'3", but you said Keon is 250. I think Juwan Jennings is closer to 215. So a huge size advantage for Keon.
Another guy who go ahead. Sorry.
No, go.
I mean, Xavier Legette, also out of South Carolina, he stood out. If you ask, I was watching a podcast. I believe it was CBS. They do. I like watching them for the Senior Bowl because they have this ex-Vikings general manager. I can't remember his name at the time right now, but they basically break down, and they were breaking down guys from the Senior Bowl. And one guy who really stood out to them, Xavier Legette from South Carolina, wide receiver. He's 6'3", 225. For his size, a big time player, like yards after catch player who can, I mean, he's a physical guy, good at the catch point. He's a jump ball receiver, but also can make people miss yards like after the catch. So that's another guy that you could probably get end of the second round. He's projected
in South Carolina. That's where Debo went. I think it's also notable. We have a pretty good relationship with South Carolina. And I think one of the things that Kyle likes about their program is that their coach is very honest. For instance, he told Kyle about Debo, like, hey, he's great, as you can see, but like, hey, watch him in the offseason. He tends to kind of pork up a little and gain a little bit of weight that he has to then, play off, getting back into practice and early in the season. So if you can limit that, you can have a great result with Debo Samuel. And so Legette sounds like an interesting, a little bit different that he's a jump ball receiver, though, obviously. But I like that sound of Yak, South Carolina, all really intriguing stuff. You mentioned Leonard Floyd. Last year, his average annual value was $7 million in 2023.
Okay. Oh, okay. I was looking at a contract that he signed back in 2021. My bad.
No worries. And then what's $7 million for a defensive end, outside linebacker, whatever you want to call it, edge player, I think is the best way to describe those guys. That's a song for a guy who has 10 sacks a year, honestly,
and doesn't miss time.
Yes, and especially for us Niners, we deal with so many injuries. It's good to know. A guy just below him on that Spotrac list is Josh Allen, the other Josh Allen out of Jacksonville, who's a hell of a defensive end, and he's at 5.685. But I think that's because that was his rookie deal. So he'll get a huge payday. I doubt we could afford it. He's kind of going to be like, not too far below Bosa numbers, I would imagine. But if we could somehow, that would be amazing. I just saw him there, so I thought I'd mention him.
Well, I mean, another guy is Kendall Fuller. If you want to go and get a cornerback, Kendall Fuller out of Washington. That's a guy who probably will go for 10, 11 million. His last contract was like 13, but you know, if you want to invest a little bit more in the secondary, which I highly doubt we do, maybe Kendall Fuller. Like that's the biggest position of need that I'm like, I have no idea what the 49ers are going to do, because if you really want to go out and get a cornerback that is actually like really solid, like an upgrade over Ambry Thomas, you're going to have to spend 10, 11, 12 million on a guy in free agency. And so it's like, do they want to, spend a little bit more money on somebody like Kendall Fuller in free agency, or do they go through the draft? Like, I have literally no idea with this position. And that's why I'm excited to start looking at some of these cornerback prospects in the draft and see if there's anyone that's like underrated and that could fly under the radar, because it's like, I feel like if you really want to get an upgrade, like I said, over Ambry Thomas, you're going to have to spend a hefty penny on another cornerback. So,
And I think
yeah.
they like Luter a lot too, if he can stay
Yeah.
healthy. I don't think we're going to bank on him, but I think he'll get his chances. Yeah, Kendall Fuller's one. That's interesting. Yeah, I think corner is a big area of need for the 49ers. Like you said, to replace Ambry Thomas. Obviously, Diamador Lenore, Charvarius Ward, those guys are rock solid. But it's always good to have depth, and definitely would love to have somebody to replace Ambry Thomas if possible. Any other areas on defense where you're looking in free agency and draft?
I know that linebacker is an area of concern, but I have not looked yet into it for the draft. Right now, I'm going to really start delving deeper into cornerbacks, and then I'll get more into linebacker very soon. But I mean, that's definitely linebacker for sure is one where, depending on what happens with Dre Greenlaw, you can't really bank on him being super good next season, because even when players do get back from an Achilles injury, they're usually a little bit slower. It takes them it really doesn't, like, let's say he gets back even the beginning of the season, and that's a short timetable. Let's say he gets back beginning of the season. I mean, it takes players quite a while to get, even close to where they were playing at the level that they were playing before. So that has to be I feel like if that's a position where we could address, second round, and even if we see a guy maybe in the first round that is dropped to us that looks really good, I mean, that could be a position for sure. Maybe not first round, because I don't know if you'd invest that much in a linebacker that's not going to play very much the first year, but yeah.
Yeah, I know they like D Winters. I know they like Jalen Graham, but
Yeah,
yeah, I
they
think
could rely on some of their rookies as well. Yeah.
yeah, but I think they want something a little more proven. I think those guys probably still need to cook a little bit more in the veteran oven.
Right.
I think I wouldn't be surprised to see like I mean, Aziz Al-Shire obviously is a name. He's going to be expensive. He would have to take a hometown. It's not really hometown, but first team discount to come back to the Niners. Levante David is a free agent from the Bucks, and he's older, so like maybe wouldn't mind stepping away once Dre's back, type of thing. And then I wouldn't be surprised to see us highly draft the linebacker. I think that's a big area of need, maybe even bigger, because honestly, even with Dre healthy, we still were missing Aziz Al-Shire. Now, granted, it's only in base package, so it's only in running situations where we play three linebackers. But I think we need some depth as well as a Dre Greenlaw replacement. Real quick, we've got Niners DNA in the house. This is Pedro Burge. He's my Monday weekly co-host on a regular basis. We do a show called I Voted for Pedro. It says Kendrick Bourne was always going to go. Jauan Jennings has proven this year that he fits in very well with this offense. Shanny won't look within himself to fix things, but he tries to seek it elsewhere. Jauan Jennings should stay. It's interesting that he brought up Kendrick Bourne, because Kendrick Bourne is also a free agent, and maybe
he's getting older though. I don't know if I honestly think there's prospects in this year's draft. I mean, there's a lot of good slot receivers in this year's draft that that you could go out and get in the third round. We have 2 third-round picks. I don't understand. I mean, it's like, I know Jawan Jennings is good, but in Kyle's scheme, and if you really if Kyle is good at scouting receivers, like Kyle does not miss many times on receivers. I think you'd agree. I think the only miss that he's had so far on receivers is Danny Gray. So
yeah, Danny Gray. Well, there was the returner from Washington. God, I'm blanking on his name because we moved up into the third to get him. He did like the Thriller dance in Arizona.
Dante Pettis.
Dante Pettis, thank you.
Yeah, I forgot about him. Oh yeah. Oh, yes.
So that was a pretty big whiff. And then, it's hard to hold this against Kyle because he never even played a down in the regular season. But Jalen Hurd,
I wouldn't say that was a miss though.
That was just a medical. But even then, I think there were warning signs. He was injured a lot as a running back in Tennessee, and that's why he went to, I forget if it was TCU or wherever he went, Baylor. I think it was Baylor, where he became a wide receiver because he didn't want to get so injured. So, I mean, I'm not going to, like you said, it's not as bad as missing on a talent thing. But still, those would be my 2 big misses, Dante Pettis and Jalen.
I completely forgot about
They're both, third round pick. I mean, because we could have had Scary Terry McLaurin instead of Jalen Hurd. So that one will always haunt me a little bit. Calvin Haas says re-sign Aziz. Yeah, the problem is Aziz had like 166 tackles last year, something like that. A lot of tackles for the Titans as a starter. I mean, like you said, though, Benjamin, when you have an Achilles, especially with like a linebacker, it's such an explosive position and so reactive. There's no guarantee that Dre will ever be back, let alone, this season. And so I think we need to start looking at that like more like a permanent replacement for Dre. And if he comes back, then we can figure it out and trade one. But I think at least for 2024, we need a really solid replacement. And Aziz would be amazing. I just don't know. Like I said, I mean, he would have to take less to come back to the 49ers than what he could get in the open market, clearly.
I see Calvin Hobbs comments needs better special teams. I completely agree with that. I don't know what we're going to do at the kicker position. Definitely not going to draft one high. But we have a 6th or 7th round pick, so I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we draft one there. Or we stick with Moody. I mean, say what you will about Moody. He's had his ups and downs, but he does have a huge leg, and maybe he can continue to improve. I mean, he did kick a 55-yard field goal in the Super Bowl. He was a part of the reason why we lost, but he wasn't the main reason why we lost. So I don't know. Maybe he improves. I mean, we'll see what happens there. I wouldn't think we'd draft a kicker anywhere before the 6th round. Or I mean, there's always so many good kickers in the free agency that are just hanging around there. Like, not good ones. Like,
I don't think we're drafting a kicker, period. I think they're going to give Jake Moody one more season at least and see what he can do. Because, in all honesty, he wasn't that terrible. It was just thinking of relying on him to win the Super Bowl was not a great thought. But like, there was a point where somebody had put up a hypothetical like, hey, it's 8 seconds to go and you have the ball on 38 and you're down by 2 to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. How are you feeling? And, and I knew what they were going for. They want us to like, oh, I'm freaking out because it's Jake Moody kicking. But if you're like me and you had it as sort of like a 50-50 game to begin with, with the Chiefs, which I did, then I think Jake Moody hitting a 55-yarder to win the game, I think it's more than 50%, So I think I'm actually feeling better about that than I did at the kickoff, oddly enough. Yeah. So now, and I guess you could get a little bit bogged down in it where you say like, oh, 55-yarder under normal circumstances is one thing, game winner, he has so few, it's hard to know.
Yeah.
I get that. But I just thought it was kind of interesting that they were going for trying to elicit this one response into me. I was like, actually, quite the opposite. I feel a little bit better than I did at kickoff. But Benjamin, I know we're running short on time here. Got anything else coming up this week? Anything else you want to talk about here today that I may have missed? Anything you got going on that you want to promote? Make sure everybody check out Ben at Camper, the #1 report on Twitter and X. And you can find the link to his YouTube channel in the description for the show. Make sure everybody likes and subscribes. It really helps us out.
Yeah. I mean, for anyone who's watching after the fact or right now, go subscribe to TED Talks Balls or TED Talks Ball.
It's all right. People do that all the time when they're griefing me.
Ball.
That's fine. That's fine.
Anyway, go subscribe to him on Twitter and X. And I do want to quickly say on the Jauan Jennings thing, I would love to bring him back, but there are always players after you're a good team. You always have to, if you're a good team, you always have to depart from it, players that you love, because those players have stood out. He's going to get a big contract. Not big, but I don't see, I mean, he's going to get a contract at least like what, 10 million and
big for a 5th option, right? That's what it comes
down
to.
Right. So it's just, I don't see it. I think there's, like I was naming out a few guys. I mean, there's so many more. There's Adonai Mitchell from Texas, and they've always been an amazing school for producing really good wide receivers in the past history. So look back at Texas as well. So Adonai Mitchell, he's 6'4". So there's just so many tall guys and good slot receivers this year. It's that you can get in the second, third round. But I will say thanks for having me on. Ted, it was an honor when you reached out to me. So thank you for having me on. I will probably be doing a live show tomorrow night talking about, quarterbacks, teams that will trade up for quarterbacks in the first round. And I'll also maybe break down in that show as well some of the receivers that the 49ers can go and get in the draft. So thanks for having me on. I really appreciate you doing this.
Absolutely, Ben. Thanks everybody for being here. I'll just say peace and go Niners.
Go Niners.